All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are right now. I hope this recording finds you all in good spirits. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen for today's class, Study Skills, week number 8. So this class, yes, should be taking place today, October 14th, 2019. This is Professor Tischler coming at you live from, well, maybe not live, recording from his home right next to the Corniche. And so, as you know, if you're hearing any crazy wind, cars beeping, you can surely know where I am right now. So, sorry I can't be with you today, but as you know, I'm out of town on at a teacher training as part of my duties here in Morocco, teaching middle school and high school English instructors as well. So to give you a little brief review of today's agenda, we will discuss sort of what's left in the class with some class updates before getting into a review of a few topics that we could be using for both our studies as well as our other classes in order to be best prepared for what's ahead. We will do a little bit of writing today that will be expected of you to do in terms of building a writing piece, revising one, preparing, and then taking some time to do a plan of action based on the materials that we have discussed. And finally, revisiting any sort of research resources, final thoughts as well. So yes, it is that final turn of the semester. We're getting down to the last 3-4 weeks to go. So basically what that means is that after this class, after this week, we really just have 3 or 4 more classes to go. And I highlighted 4 because normally the last week is given to students for studying and there's no formal classes. However, the final week, which will fall on December 12th, we will still have a class. However, it will be an optional class and a class strictly focused on review for the examination. So would be a great time for you to come, ask me any questions that you have as well. And two, there may be treats, some candy. So maybe I can tempt you to come that way. All right, so the content we still have to cover after today is that I'm dealing with specifically academic and exam anxiety and how we can be most effective on the days of our exams and in preparation. So 2 very useful subjects to still be covered before we end the course. So my advice to you before we get started is to keep planning or to start planning if you have not already. If you have not been planning for these exams, you have not been paying attention to my course, that upsets me. So please be sure that you're doing that. Along with that, fix your routine. Please, please, please start fixing the routine so that day in, day out, it looks the same in terms of how many hours you're sleeping, what you are eating, study time, also free time. Really start planning that out so that it becomes a fixed routine, not just for you mentally, but also physically. Okay, we have to be taking care of ourselves. Continue to revisit and revise your notes. Ask questions if you have them. You can always send me an email. And to be sure that you're trying to meet with your other instructors as well when you have those questions of misunderstanding. In terms of revising your notes, make questions for yourselves. Start testing one another on the material. So you can make questions for your partners to study and vice versa. Meet with your classmates on campus, off campus. Form those study groups, make those connections. Remember, it can be a team effort in your studying plans. And finally, as you know what I'm going to say, drink water. Be sure you're keeping hydrated, drinking your fluids. As you know, the brain is made up of what percent? That's right, 85% water. So, the first thing I wanted to review today was to take another look at brainstorming. And again, if you remember what we discussed a few weeks ago, what is brainstorming? It's the process of free thinking and generating ideas without being bound by restraints such as, is this a good idea or a bad idea? So I took this quotation from Slater and Corey in 2003 on their talk on brainstorming. And really how I like to think about brainstorming is taking everything that you have in your mind, in your brain, and before you just start writing something or creating something, put down all the ideas you have on paper. Okay, because once you have all your ideas out, maybe after 2 to 5 minutes, then you can sort of sort your ideas into what might be the best items to mention, whether it be for an exam or writing a project. So really trying to unload all the knowledge that you have before doing so. Now, how we can do brainstorming. 3 different techniques we talked about. The first being free writing, if you remember. And really what this is just a way of writing without thinking. Okay, so it doesn't have to follow a format, it doesn't have to be paragraphs, proper sentences. It could be just writing words down. Okay, and one way that you could do that is, again, free writing. So I might tell you, for example, right now, to pause this video, take about 5 minutes, and free write about a career that interests you. Ready, set, write. Okay, so if you haven't already, please pause the video if you still need to write down the prompt. But again, free writing, writing without thinking. Next would be mind maps, something that can be called webbing as well. And so a mind map, as you could see down there in the bottom right hand corner, is a map that has large circle in the center for your main idea, your topic, your problem, and then it starts to branch off into other different bubbles, squares, circles, in order for you to start talking about the smaller topics within the main idea. So here you can list examples, different reasons, rationale, evidence, all of that. So really, again, it's just taking all those random thoughts that you have in your brain, that we all do, and organizing them in a way that are kind of clusters, but again, they are related to one another. So in order to practice this, I might tell you to do the same right now, to, again, create a mind map about the reasons I'm interested in the career that you mentioned in the previous slide with free writing. And so in the middle, you can put a nice little bubble, circle, square, a star, whatever shape you would like, reading reasons I'm interested in, and then start to branch off the different ideas that you have. So if I was to give this for an assignment in class, I would tell you to take another 5 minutes to do this. So at this moment, you might want to pause your video again and practice making a mind map. Okay, so as I mentioned before, this mind map that you can use again to help start brainstorming their ideas, taking the information you have from your brain, putting it down on paper before beginning a writing prompt. So feel free to pause the video if you're still taking notes on this, but we are going to continue. And one more brainstorming idea I wanted to get out to you that you could practice is something called just simply a list, right? So making a bulleted list is another form of brainstorming. You can do this in sort of in columns or just one column, and within it sort of making bullet points of what you would want to mention. So these bullet points, they don't have to follow any particular structure. But again, here's where you could place different details and examples um, on paper in order to talk about your main topic or main idea. Okay, so again, if you wanted to practice this right now about a career that interests you, I might tell you to take some bulleted list notes on your career choice and answer the following questions. What are my interests? What are my talents? What is my personality? And to start taking bulleted notes of how you would answer that question as well, and making not just answers onto the paper, but as well as listing examples, evidence, and etc. there. Okay, so this again could be another form of brainstorming in which I could ask you to take another 5 minutes and practice this particular form of brainstorming. Okay, so again, if you're still taking notes on the slide, please pause the video because I will be moving on. This PowerPoint will also go up on the class website at the end of class. So again, one final thought on brainstorming before we continue. I just want you to remember that when you are brainstorming, you do not need to do all three. You do not need to do free writing, mind maps, and lists. I would suggest you trying to find one of these that works best for you. If you like to free write, free write. If you like to do mind maps, use a mind map. If you like to make lists, make a list. Focus on just using only one form of brainstorming in order to help you start to plan for what we're going to discuss next, which is outlining. So you might remember last week we spent some time discussing this in particular, outlining, okay, and what that is. So an outline, after we do our brainstorming, is a way that we could start to format the ideas that we have written down during our brainstorming session and start to focus on how we are going to write a paragraph, how we are going to write an essay, how we are going to write for a particular academic piece. And so this allows you to categorize the main points, organizing your paragraphs in an order that makes sense, as well as making sure that your arguments, your ideas for each paragraph are fully developed as well. Okay? By all means, if anything you could take from this lecture that I'm providing you right now is that when you are given an assignment, whether to write a paragraph, to write an essay, you should never just start to write your essay or your paragraph without considering brainstorming and outlining beforehand. Okay, so essentially the outline helps prevent a writer from getting stuck when performing the actual writing of the essay. So really what this is doing is it's saving you time and it's saving you a headache and any anxiety that could come during an examination in which you are forced to write in order to complete. So some of the templates, I just wanted to give a quick reminder of what we discussed last week. I know a lot of you in your reading comprehension class, we discussed about how we can use an outline for talking about a story we read, focusing on the title, the setting, main characters, plot, conflict, and conclusion. There was also a message as well about how we can focus on writing an essay in a class. Now, I know that the majority of you right now are not in a Composition 2 class which focuses on writing an essay, but this could be another form of writing an outline using the alphanumeric template, in which we use Roman numerals up top here to provide our headings for each paragraph, and then points with either the Arabic alphabet or using numbers as well to break down point by point within each section. Something that might be a little bit more helpful for the majority of you in the paragraph writing class is a paragraph outline for writing a paragraph. Okay, so focusing on your topic sentence to begin, and then your points of support. So your first one, normally your strongest, your second, which tends to be the weakest, and your third, which tends to be the support that's in the middle, the third best, and then a concluding sentence. You see under each support you can add here different examples or evidence in order to strengthen the support that you're adding of the main topic. So now let's go on and focus a little bit about before we write. Okay, and so these are some of the questions I think you should start asking yourself after you brainstorm, after you outline, before you start writing. Did you accomplish all these ahead of time? Okay, and what this checklist does basically is it makes sure that you are accountable and you have done everything you can in order to prepare for your writing. So, have you decided on how you're going to present the information? Did you include a specific topic? Is there a thesis, summarizing statement? Did you introduce your main ideas? Did you cover what you will include in each body paragraph? Did you note any examples, supporting evidence for your main points? Did you outline how you're going to plan your conclusion? Did you address any holes or weak areas in your argument or information? So making sure that if you do need to do some research, where do you need to do more research? This could be in maybe future classes when you're starting to write more analytical pieces that require investigations. This is again where you can note in your outline, did you cover everything that you need to cover? Okay. And finally, thinking about from which perspective you're going to write from. Are you writing this from a first person point of view, an I, or a third person point of view, in which it's more generic and so the reader is reading it from a third person point of view? Okay, and then once we have covered all that, then we can get into writing what we like to call the first draft or the rough copy of your writing, so the first attempt. Now I just wanted to do a few other exercises in terms of building paragraphs, as the majority of you are in a paragraph writing class right now. And another form of outlining that I think you should all be considering, as I've been reading some of your pieces, I think some of the lack that I've been seeing in the paragraph writing is a lack of outlining ahead of time. So considering things of what the title is of your piece, the topic sentence, your body, as well as your conclusion. Now I put up here, yes, a very silly, easy paragraph. However, what it does here though is outline bit by bit ahead of time before actually writing the body paragraph. And so in response right now, to give you some practice as well, formatting or taking the information from the paragraph and answering those specific outline questions, I tell you to read the example paragraph and answer the questions. So this should take you about anywhere from 2 to 3 minutes. So I will do a quick pause for you to practice. Okay, so again, in the interest of time, that hasn't been 2 minutes, but I would suggest again that you pause the video if you are practicing this assignment, just to make sure that, again, you are being able to answer the questions thoroughly, complete sentences even better. Now it would be your turn to practice. So if we were in class right now, I think this would be a nice time for you again to reflect on the practice of just simply writing. Because another point I just want to mention is that a lot of the times what lacks in a writing course, as well as just us being scholars of foreign languages, is that taking the time to actually just sit down and write. I know it's a very tedious task. It's not the easiest. It's not always the most enjoyable for some of you. But no matter the fact, you still need to go on and practice this. Okay? So even if it's just doing simple assignments like this about writing about your favorite animal, your favorite actor, your favorite sport, okay, and just writing about things that interest you. Because the more comfortable that you become using a pencil and paper, the easier it's going to be. And so again, um, when you're trying to formulate that paragraph, first focusing on making a title so your reader knows what you're talking about, then a topic sentence that tells the reader what the paragraph is going to be about in a sentence form. The body paragraphs, which again are the main part of your paragraph, I like to think of as kind of the meat, the vegetables, the sauces in a sandwich. Okay, a lot of times when I write a paragraph or write an essay, I like to use the analogy of a cheeseburger, because again, I like cheeseburgers. So, with that being said, you have the bun, the bread that has your introduction and your introduction, your conclusion, and then your body sentences or body paragraphs in the middle would be the meat, the vegetables, as well as the sauces, the delicious part. And then finally, to sum everything up and to put the bun on top of your sandwich, you would have the conclusion to leave a lasting impression on your readers, something that's interesting, that sort of sums up your main ideas of what you talked about in the paragraph. So again, you can see here the different forms of writing an outline for a paragraph. Feel free to pause the video, copy these down, and practice. The more comfortable you become just practicing your writing, the easier it's going to be come exam day. Okay, that I promise you. It's not just all mental, it's also physical. So you have to get physically fit in order to write effectively. Now, with the latter part of this lecture, I want to take some time to talk about the idea of proofreading. So some of you might read that and say, proofreading? What is proofreading, Thomas? Could you explain more? Not a problem. So proofreading basically means before you hit submit when you send me an email with a paragraph, before you turn in a paper to your instructor, do you reread what you are giving me? Now, I know that some of you do, but I know that some of you also don't do this. So a lot of times students rush to finish a paper, turn it into the instructor, but don't check it before they do. And a lot of the times when you don't proofread something, you end up leaving a lot of mistakes on your papers. Mistakes are errors. And so what I want you to think about first is, what do you think is the difference between a mistake and an error? Take about 30 seconds to think about that. So now that you've had some time to ponder between the two, I'll mention here what some of the major differences are. So when you make a mistake, it tends to be something accidental, and also something that you know is wrong. So for example, in the classroom, if you cheat by copying your neighbor's answers, you know that's wrong. That's a mistake that you made. If you want to think about it as something more societal, think about the fact if you are the boyfriend or girlfriend of somebody and you kiss somebody that's not your boyfriend or your girlfriend, not your partner, that is also something, again, a mistake, something you shouldn't have done. It's wrong. As an error tends to be something that's more a lack of knowledge. It's more formal than a mistake, but it's the systematic fact that one just doesn't know what they're doing. For example, machines like a computer, for example, they don't make mistakes. They make errors because they are unable to do something as well. And this tends to be sometimes what happens when we are maybe speaking in English, writing in English as well. Sometimes we make mistakes that we know what was wrong, but it just happened. But that we also make errors because sometimes we just don't know yet. We haven't gotten to that level with the language. So how can you prevent yourself from repeating a writing error over and over again? And so really what I can tell you is being sure to take notes and practicing, okay? Because if you want to sort of perfect your writing style, it takes constant practice, okay? And getting reviewed over by somebody, whether it be an instructor, a friend, a colleague, maybe a family member, somebody that's strong in the English language. This is the way that you can sort of overcome repeating constant errors. A lot of the times for me, when I used to make spelling mistakes on a writing, what I would do is I would take that word afterwards and I would rewrite the word 10 times correctly in my notebook. Because then by that seventh, eighth time, the spelling of that word becomes sort of a habit in my writing to write it correctly. If it's something with grammar, I would do something more or less of trying to figure out ways of how I can use that grammar form correctly and then write about it. So a lot of the times if I used to make mistakes in writing in the past tense, in the simple past, what I would do is each day write 5 to 6 sentences about what I did that day, focusing that my verbs are put in the correct past tense form. Now, again, why is it important to make mistakes and errors in life? And we know that with mistakes and with errors, this is how we grow. And in terms of learning English, for example, we are going to make many mistakes. We are going to make many errors when we are learning a language. However, what we can't do is let those mistakes and those errors stop us from going forward. You have to remember that the road to learning any language, whether it be English, Darija, Chinese, French, Japanese, Russian, it's never a straight path. There are many curves and turns within learning a language, and mistakes happen, errors happen. But if you take the time to actually learn from them and find ways in doing so, it's only going to make you a stronger user of the language. So I want to take the next part of this proofreading discussion and focus a bit on some of the common writing errors and mistakes that I've been seeing, not just from this class, but from my other classes as well. So this will include both S3 students as well as S5 students, some master students. And the first kind of mistake I've been seeing a lot with people's writings is the use of sentence fragments. And so what sentence fragments are basically incomplete sentences that do not contain independent clauses. And an independent clause, that being a subject and verb. And so you might see here in this first example, in Canada were thousands of lakes. Well, what's missing here? You're right, we'd have no verb there. So maybe we could say instead in Canada where there are thousands of lakes. So we have some missing parts here. Some of the students working through the night. Again, I'm not sure what is trying to be said here exactly. Again, we're missing a certain part here. In particular, some of the students are working through the night. Some of the students were working through the night. We're missing that to be verb in there for it to be a complete independent clause. So you could take a look at a few of the other examples of practice in your notebooks. Apostrophe errors. Oof, apostrophes. So crucial, so crucial. We use apostrophes whether for possession, for contractions, So this is, again, something we want to make sure that we are using correctly. The cat ate its food quickly. So that apostrophe S there, you think it's necessary? It's not. Because if it's talking possessively here, it's food, we don't need an apostrophe. It's going to be a busy work week. Now again, here you might see that the it's, this time we're not using it's as a possessive, but more as a conjunction, as it is. So we'd want that apostrophe there. Feel free to take a look at the other examples. Subject and verb errors. Okay, so making sure that, yes, we are consistently focusing on how we properly conjugate the verbs based on the subject. So, neither George nor Lisa are home. So, you might see here George and Lisa and think two people. However, with this nor here, what we're doing is talking about both of them singularly. So therefore, neither George nor Lisa is home. The referee and the players is waiting for the rain to stop. Well, what is the subject? Referee and players. It's plural. So not is, but are. Take a look at the other three examples. Practice. Feel free to pause this video and practice making error corrections here. This will be a topic as well we cover a little bit more next week. Comma splices or run-on sentences. Oof, sometimes I'm reading pieces and I don't know when the sentence is going to end. And for me as the reader, it's tiring. So we want to make sure that we are trying to properly use our commas and adding punctuation when necessary. So we could do this by adding a conjunction like and, but, or, taking one sentence and making it into two sentences, or a semicolon in order to separate two independent clauses. It was a delicious dinner. We had steak and salad. So here, for example, I would probably add a semicolon because again, it separates the two ideas we have there. You can also separate it by putting a period to end the independent clause and then capitalizing the W. The scenery is gorgeous. There are lakes, mountains, and forests to explore. Again, here I would probably go with the form of taking one sentence, making it to two. The scenery is gorgeous, period. Capitalize the T. There are lakes, mountains, and forests to explore. Think about how you might handle the next two. Formatting, formatting. Yes, especially when you're writing a paragraph, please be sure that you are making it readable. Okay, so first off, making sure to check your spelling before you submit. I've been a bit disappointed receiving spelling mistakes on emails because I know that on emails, on Word documents, they have spell check there. So please be sure that you're checking your spelling and making sure that you're using the correct use of a word. Spacing. Okay, you see here in this paragraph, and this is something I see commonly, in which, why is there this empty space here, in which a sentence has an end and continues here? Be sure that we are going from left to right, all the way to the end of the line. Okay, you only need one space between a period. Indentation as well. So again, think in there all about that. And font. So using something that tends to be something the reader can read. Don't try to get too fancy. So be sure that your handwriting is legible for the instructor. If you are having trouble writing your letters, start practicing writing your letters in a legible way. Your instructors are not mind readers. We are not going to try to guess what you wrote there. If it is not legible, it will be incorrect. Formality and tone. So again, with that being said, Making sure that you're writing it in a consistent format. If you're writing it in the third person, only write in the third person. If you're writing it in the first person, like I, be sure you're only writing it in the first person. Keep it consistent, as well as your tone. You want to make sure that the reader understands the points that you are trying to make, and it is clear in a sensible way. You might take a look at this paragraph here, decide what doesn't belong as well. Bee experts don't know exactly what is causing the rapid decline of honeybees, but most agree that chemicals are largely to blame. The use of pesticides has increased dramatically in recent years. I never use pesticides in my garden. Climate change is another suspect. Extreme weather such as drought can make it difficult for bees to do their job. Well, what sentence doesn't belong? Again, keeping in mind the formality within that as well as the tone. And finally, capitalization. Okay, what words do we capitalize? The first one in a sentence, always. The word I, always. Proper nouns, important words in a title or heading. So take a look at some of these here, because these are some examples I found even within this class and some of the other students at this university. But again, we want to make sure that capital letters are there. In order to be considered credible writers, you need to be sure that you're giving credible writing. So checking your work before you submit. Now, I might tell you, for example, to start creating questions to practice with your partners, your writing. And maybe as you are doing that, you can have your partners correct your papers as well. So sort of some peer editing. And so here are some different symbols that we can use as we're giving notes on things such as spelling, the word choice, the form, a verb test, etc. Deletion, addition, punctuation, case, so whether capital or lowercase with our letters, the tone, as well as the format. So you could see an example here. I wanted going to a party, but I don't go, although I had pepper to write. There's a lot happening there. Now you could see the notes that were made there based on the symbols above, and then the correction there given. Okay, so again, this might be a nice key of symbols to use with your partners as you practice revisiting your notes and maybe doing mock exams or mock tests with your classmates. And finally, again, what to think about before you're hitting submit, before you turn in a paper to your instructor. Be sure that you're asking yourselves these questions. Did you run the document through a spell check program? This, of course, if you're using email or submitting a paper virtually. Did you check the apostrophes, proper spacing around punctuation marks? Is the tone consistent? Did you read the text aloud in a quiet place? Now, if it's in an exam room, you could do this, but you could kind of do it in a soft whisper. That again, won't disrupt your classmates. A lot of times just moving your lips as you read it. Did you check the capitalization, the consistency in your fonts and your letter writing? Does every sentence have an independent clause? Independent clause again, a subject and a verb. Are the commas used properly? And does the writer's name appear on the document? Yes, because again, if you don't write your name on the paper, that's going to be an automatic out for your instructor. Okay, we can't give grades to ghosts, and we're not going to guess who they are. All right, so now with the latter part of this lecture, I want to take some time about how we can better revise. And so preparing our notes for examination and for study. So the first thing I'd like to mention is about a lecture revision. So I know a lot of you take notes during my class. Some of you, write out the full notes. Some of you take the notes that you can with the time given. That's great. But how many of you are checking those afterwards? So being sure that you read that you go back and clean up your notes afterwards. So taking 10 to 15 minutes to go over your notes and write it in a way that's going to be easy for you to understand later. So a lot of times I would like to clean up my notes right after class or after my class day is done. Another suggestion is to read or study ahead of time. I see no problem in asking an instructor, what are we going to discuss next week? I tell you every week, both verbally and on our class website, what we are going to talk about. So please do that so that you can read or study the subject ahead of time. So you're sort of ahead of the game. Use that long weekend that you have to your advantage. I know the majority of you have Friday through Monday off in terms of your classes. So be sure that you're scheduling the time in order to revisit your various classes that you have. Okay, so again, thinking about those plans and those daily planners, weekly planners. Now, as you revise for tests and quizzes, I suggest reviewing a syllabus. Now, in this class, you can see that the syllabus is on our class website. Oops, excuse me here as I move this over. Right on the home page, study skills there. You can see up all the way down here. We go over everything here. So here's our syllabus. Okay, there should be no surprises about what is discussed in this class. Also to consider as you are preparing for tests and quizzes, plan and study ahead. To plan study time ahead. So making sure that you are not just saying, okay, I need to study for my reading comprehension class. Well, when are you going to do it? Plan a time. Make it a consistent time so that's part of your routine daily and or weekly. Maybe plan to do study groups as well. So plan it out with your classmates. Prepare for examable topics. By examable topics, taking that word there, exam, things that you think the professor might put on there. So a lot of times this just happens to be some of the topics in class. And look, if you look at our course syllabus, for example, you could see, all the topics that are covered. So it would probably be a good idea to start focusing on those, right? As you're focusing on examable topics. Those are the topics that could appear on our exam. Which ones do you think I spent the most time on? Okay, so understanding your professor's style and understanding what you think the professor would be important. And so with that, in some classes you have a lot of content to think about. This is where using study groups can be helpful in order to kind of divide and conquer the material that you have. So somebody studies one topic, another one studies the other, and then you teach and review together. And what exactly this professor expects? Now I'm taking a quote here from Orr, in which from our textbook that's also on the class website, what the professor expects. Superior students will not only know about these critical relationships, but also about their implications and the assumptions upon which they are based. Okay, so it's expected that, again, you know what the topics are about, and you can give us an idea of what they are, but be sure that you're able to explain them. Go above just giving a simple definition, okay? Because the more ways that you can think about application and how it relates to the overall topic, the stronger it's going to be, the stronger it's going to look when you answer on an examination form. Now, the day of the exam. We're going to be focusing on this topic more in the coming weeks. However, what I would tell you to start thinking about is thinking about what your routine is going to be. Now, the day of the exam is not the time for you to start studying new information. It is the time that you could possibly go over a few notes or any questions that you still have to sort of revisit. And it should be something that you have a routine. What time you're going to wake up. What are you going to eat for breakfast? Okay, so something like that, yes. Thinking about what's a good food to eat before. Drinking water. Any other considerations? How you're getting to class. What time. So having a strict routine that you can follow so that on the day of the exam, you're not running around like a chicken without its head. Study. Where are you studying? If possible, studying in the classroom or a similar place or similar venue. A lot of times university students will try to find a place in the university that is similar where they're going to take their tests. So if you can find a classroom to study in, that's ideal because of the fact it's going to kind of prepare you mentally and physically for the environment that you're going to be taking your test in. And the question that I've been getting from many of you, what is on the exam, teacher? Well, anything and everything, okay? And by anything and everything, that basically again goes to what the course information that's provided on our syllabus on our website. It could be any of these items. So prepare for anything and everything. So consider different ways of revisiting main ideas. You might remember from week 5, we discussed note-taking and this specific model of a charting method. So here you could outline different topics that we discussed, and then here add particular notes, sort of a box pattern, in order to talk about what you already know, possibly things you need to study a little bit more. Plan of action. Okay, this is going to be, again, something we start off with next week, but I'd give you this little exercise right now in order to consider the content we've discussed and how you could better implement it in your time. This is a point I would tell you to pause the video to answer, but I will pause myself in order for you to take some notes. Okay, so again, I would suggest you either pause the video or take a look at the PowerPoint on the class website in order to practice this plan of action. Again, this will be something we start with at the start of our next class, in which, yes, we will meet in person next week, November 21st. So here we are with the final thoughts, the end of our lecture. So as I mentioned, we still have about 3 to 4 weeks to go. So what should you be doing? Reviewing your notes, practicing your writing, pencil and paper, reviewing your writing for checking for any mistakes, formatting, etc. Mistakes and errors, excuse me. Okay, and then after your review, write again. Just get into the habit of writing every day so that, again, you're getting that physical habit down pat so that it's going to make that exam day preparation just a bit easier. Reminders again, you all should have my email. You should all have the class website where the materials are. This video will be updated there. So you can see here with the 3 tabs, the home or where syllabus is. Up here on the class resources goes on to give you everything that we have from week 1 all the way to the current week. Study Skills textbook is attached here. So you can see an outline of everything here. I will update these week 8 materials right now. So you can see again all the materials that we have here. Be sure that you're checking those over. Please and thank you. And then also my contact information, the email is up there again. Next week, we will get onto the topic of scholastic anxiety, okay, and how we can overcome those in both outside of the classroom as well as in the classroom. So we're going to have a pretty serious conversation next week, a bit about mental health. And so I hope to see you all next week. Thank you again for participating in this video lecture. If you have any questions, please send me an email. And keep yourselves hydrated, stay healthy, sleep, and I will see you all next week. Take care. Thank you.